I believe that in this process of going from ideas to, let's call it a thing for the moment, you go through these loops. You know that you start over and you back up, and at the beginning you have a big trash can that you fill up, and by the time you get to the end, it's not quite so much culling going on. Dave Wallace, who teaches our senior design course now, says you go from wide and shallow to narrow and deep in this process. Now the point is that good designers run back and forth along that spectrum with incredible fluidity. And they always know where they are. And they always use the kind of thinking that's appropriate for there. And I argue that that is a profoundly good way to learn about critical thinking. Because in that spectrum, for example, you may be trying to convince your team at one point, which is all diffuse, not rational causal. Another, you're deriving an equation to decide what the gear ratio ought to be. That's nice and clean, different kind of epistemology. So I think design is a great model for learning critical thinking, and I think that a poet that understands the universe is a better poet. I think everybody wins if they understand the universe. So it took us more years to learn this than I expected, but in the senior design course in particular, where there are teams of 20, you learn very quickly that a very persuasive person with bad ideas is terrible. It's scary because as an instructor, you may recognize that's a terrible idea, but you don't go in and intervene and say, don't listen to this person. So you have to let that play out in some way. And you learn, the participants in the team learn that being persuasive does not make you right, and being right does not make you persuasive. So some of the trade-off space for being a part of that group is there in spades. So I think for a lot of reasons, making is a very high-level intellectual activity. Designing and making is a very high-level intellectual activity. And the counterpoint is that we default the other way too much. We think that an equation explains, when in fact it only explains if you already understand the phenomenon. And so many faculty said, well, they should understand it. I derived the equation for them. That's different. That's not an explanation. So making with purpose is really important, I think. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for doing this. The chaos monkeys, as some people call it, have started scrambling all the major industries. And kids now are going to walk into a very different world. And they're going to have to be fleet of foot to make wise decisions. So my optimism is based on the kids in the future. I've said to the first community that in a space that's on the vertical axis, things to people, on the horizontal axis, facts to opinions, the facts, things space is pretty nice because that's where the laws of the universe live. That's where the robot behavior is determined. We're pretty good at that. The people, facts, things is really getting to be interesting because we're learning about our own thinking. We're learning about how we learn. And that's getting better and more interesting. In the people opinion stuff, things are more complex. That's a really fuzzy, hairy quadrant to be in. That's where aesthetics and beauty and empathy and a whole bunch of other things exist. And really, really important, but not so easy to define as the stuff in the other quadrant. And the opinions about people is where some people think their opinion affects physics. And if alternative facts could exist, that's where they would be. I celebrate students kind of staying out of that corner. I think they're doing a pretty darn good job in showing in these competitions that they can understand the laws of nature and make robots that really work. They're learning about their ability to think and learn. Through the ethos of FIRST in particular and gracious professionalism and the stuff at MIT, they're celebrating some of the human stuff that we do. So to some extent they're learning about nature, they're learning about themselves, and they're learning about humanity. And it's reasonable, I think, to say that they're taking truth and knowledge and morphing it into wisdom. And that's good. In the language of FIRST, they're becoming gracious professionals, and that's the reason I love them.